I'm live. It's Sunday. It's Sunday evening. It's summer. It's summer, swarthy Sunday. Louisiana, muggy, humid. Try and keep my air conditioner not freezing because it's just not good. So here we are inside. I didn't want to be outside. It was too muggy. Time to read. And I didn't go on Discord because I kind of surprised myself. I just said, let's get up and do it. So I've gone on to read. We are still on book 2, chapter 21. And this chapter is still in, is it a long one? It is a long one. This chapter is still in England. And remember, Lucy is on her honeymoon and Dr. Manette has gone to join the family on the honeymoon. So this is called Echoing Footsteps. A wonderful corner for echoes, it has been remarked, that corner where the doctor lived, ever busily winding the golden thread which bound her husband and her father and herself and her old directress and companion in a life of quiet bliss. Lucy sat in the still house in the tranquility resounding corner, listening to the echoing footsteps of years. So this golden thread is Lucy with her golden hair. But when we think about the golden age, anytime we hear about that golden thread, we think in terms of like perfection. It was the idyllic time. So this is saying that after the wedding, everything's going well. At first, there were times, though she was a perfectly happy young wife, when her work would slowly fall from her hands and her eyes would be dimmed, for there was something coming in the echoes, something light afar off and scarcely audible yet, that stirred her heart too much, fluttering hopes and doubts, hope of love as yet unknown to her, doubts of her remaining upon earth to enjoy that new delight divided her breast. So as a young person, sometimes we dream of our future and, what that family is going to be like, having children, being blissful, and also the fear. I think so many of us think we won't make it to our 30s. We'll die young. Only the die young, the song goes. So she's kind of in that place between so happy and hoping towards something good and so happy, fearful that something terrible is around the corner. Among the echoes, then, there would arise the sound of footsteps at her own early grave, and thoughts of the husband who would be left so desolate, and who would mourn for her so much, swelled to her eyes and broke like waves. That time passed, and her little Lucy lay on her bosom, so she's had a baby. Then among the advancing echoes, there was the tread of her tiny feet and the sound of her prattling words. Let greater echoes resound as they would, the young mother at the cradle side could always hear those coming. They came, and the shady house was sunny with a child's laugh. And the divine friend of children, to whom in her trouble she had confided hers, seemed to take her child in his arms, as he took the child of old, and made it a sacred joy to her. Ever busily winding the golden thread that bound them all together, weaving the service of happy influence through the tissue of all their lives, and making it predominant nowhere, Lucy heard in the echoes of years none but friendly and soothing sounds. So this is an interesting way that Dickens makes time pass. He's kind of just putting us inside her head, and we're not looking at all the details. We're just getting this summary judgment of, life is going by. She has a little girl. She's growing up, but she has this dread because her mother died when she was young and her father was dead to her as far as she knew growing up. So there's Dickens kind of laying out all of this passage of time, which is surprising because he spends so much time giving so much detail. Her husband's step was strong and prosperous among them, her father's firm and equal. Lo, Miss Pross, in harness of string, awakening the echoes as an unruly charger, whip-corrected, snorting and pawing the earth into the plane tree in the garden. Even there were sounds of sorrow among the rest. They were not harsh or cruel. Even when golden hair, like her own, lay in a halo on a pillow round the worn face of a little boy, and he said with a radiant smile, "Dear Papa and Mama, I'm very sorry to leave you both and to leave my pretty sister, but I'm called and I must go." Those were not tears all of agony that wetted his young mother's cheek, as the spirit departed from her embrace that had been entrusted to it. Suffer them and forbid them not. They see my Father's face. Oh, Father, blessed words. So if you skimmed this, you would miss the fact that she's now had two children, a little girl and a little boy, and the little boy has died. So we hear about the birth of this boy through his death, an interesting technique. Thus, the rustling of angels' wings got blended with the other echoes, and they were not wholly of earth, but had in them that breath of heaven. Sighs of the winds that blew over a little garden tomb were mingled with them also, and both were audible to Lucy in a hushed murmur, like the breathing of a summer sea asleep upon a sandy shore. As the little Lucy, comically studious at the task of the morning, or dressing a doll at her mother's footstool, chattered in the tongues of the two cities that were blended in her life. The tale of two cities. Name drop, title drop, as close as we're going to get. So that's Paris and London. So they live between the two. The echoes rarely, or they're aware, the language, chattered in the tongue, so she's bilingual. So it's not obvious, those of you that struggle with comprehension, he doesn't make it obvious that they're growing up in a bilingual household. And isn't that important? But if the teacher were to ask a question, how many languages does baby Lucy, or how many children did Lucy Manette have, it would be tricky. And you'd have to have read really closely to pick up on that. The echoes rarely answered to the actual tread of Sidney Carton. Some half dozen times a year at most, he claimed his privilege of coming in uninvited and would sit among them through the evening as he had once done often. So Sidney is still a friend of theirs, but not more than 6 times a year. He never came there heated with wine, and one thing regarding him was whispered in the echoes, which had been whispered by all true echoes for ages and ages. No man ever really loved a woman, lost her, and knew her with a blameless though an unchanged mind when she was a wife and mother. But her children had a strange sympathy with him, an instinctive delicacy of pity for him. What fine hidden sensibilities are touched in such a case, no echoes tell, but it is so, and it was so here. Carton was the first stranger to whom little Lucy held out her chubby arms, and he kept his place with her as she grew. The little boy had spoken of him almost at the last. Poor Carton, kiss him for me. So Sidney Carton is still around. He still loves Lucy, but it's hard for him to be around because he does love her. But ironically or foreshadowingly, the children connect to Sidney Carton. And the little boy, as he's dying, thought of Sidney Carton. So that's Dickens' way of weaving him as an important character in the family. Mr. Stryver shouldered his way through the law like some great engine forcing itself through turbid water, and dragged his useful friend in his wake, like a boat towed astern. As the boat, so favored, is usually in a rough plight and mostly underwater, so Sidney had swamped life of it. But easy and strong custom, unhappily so much easier and stronger in him than any stimulating sense of desert or disgrace, made it the life he was to lead. And he no more thought of emerging from his state of lion's jackal than any real jackal may be supposed to think of rising to be a lion. Stryver was rich, had married a florid widow with property and 3 boys, who had nothing particularly shining about them but the straight hair of their dumpling heads. So I'm looking up because I don't remember what this word florid means. A florid widow, let's see. And not that it matters, but I'm just curious. Oh, it's about the complexion. She's kind of pink reddish. She's got those red cheeks. So she might be a ginger, as we would say. So that's why I didn't know it's not something we really use anymore. Where were we? These 3 young gentlemen, Mr. Stryver, exuding patronage of the most offensive quality from every pore, had walked before him like 3 sheep to the quiet corner in Soho, and had offered his pupils to Lucy's husband, delicately saying, "Hello, here are 3 lumps of bread and cheese towards your matrimonial picnic, Darnay." So Darnay's, a teacher. The polite rejection of the 3 lumps of bread and cheese had quite bloated Mr. Stryver with indignation, which he afterwards turned to account in the training of the young gentlemen by directing them to beware of the pride of beggars, like that Tudor fellow, so bad blood between them. He was also in the habit of declaiming to Mrs. Stryver over his full-bodied wine on the arts Mrs. Darnay had once put in practice to catch him. So, we see his true self. And on the cut diamond arts in himself, madame, which had rendered him not to be caught. Some of his King's Bench familiars, who were occasionally parties to the full-bodied wine and the lie, excused him for the latter by saying that he had told it so often that he believed himself, which is surely such an incorrigible aggravation of that originally bad offense as to justify any such offenders being carried off to some suitably retired spot and there hanged out of the way. So we see that Stryver's just still obsessed. He believes, he tells the wife that he marries when he takes his sons to be students of Charles Darnay rejects him. And then Stryver, being full of himself, is like, she tried to get me to, she's just bitter because she tried to trick me into marrying her and I didn't marry her. And they went on to say, people tell themselves lies so much that they the people he told the lie to know it's a lie, but they excuse him of the lie because he's told the lie to himself so much that he believes it himself. A lot of subtext written in here that you kind of have to pay attention to. Not that it really drives the plot, but just helps you with understanding comments. There were among the echoes to which Lucy, sometimes pensive, sometimes amused and laughing, pensive like worried, listened in the echoing corner until her little daughter was 6 years old. How near to her heart the echoes of her child's tread came, and those of her own dear father's, always active and self-possessed, and those of her dear husband's need not be told, nor how the slightest echo of their united home, directed by herself with such a wise and elegant thrift that it was more abundant than any waste, was music to her, nor how there were echoes all about her, sweet in her ears, of the many times her father had told her that he found her more devoted to him married, if that could be, than single, and of the many times her husband had said to her that no cares and duties seemed to divide her love from him or help to him, and ask her, what is the magic secret, my darling, of your being everything to all of us, as if there were only one of us, yet never seeming to be hurried or to have had too much to do? This is really this romantic era portrayal of a female, that women are so perfect. They're so pure. In psychology, it's kind of the Madonna horror complex, that a woman is either trash or she's perfection. And so all these people portray her as the perfect wife, the perfect mother, the perfect daughter. And as a woman, we know, she can have had a personality that just drew everybody to her, but could she really, really be this perfect? And I've got a comment, but I can't read it. So let me see. Mies, Roterdink. Finished your And the Mountains Echoed. Well, I'm so glad. Did you read it for school? I'm glad you enjoyed it. It was not my favorite book, not my least favorite either, but a good read. I'm glad I read it. But I'm curious to know why you read it. Did you read it for personal interest or for school? All right, so we've got this perfect Lucy that we need to remember. She's just beloved by everyone. But there were other echoes from a distance that rumbled menacingly in the corner all through this space of time. And it was now about little Lucy's 6th birthday, so we've passed at least 6 years since the wedding, that they began to have an awful sound, as of a great storm in France with a dreadful sea rising. On a night in mid-July, 1789, so we've put it in historical context, 1776 is the American Revolution. The storming of the Bastille was shortly thereafter. So now we're in 1789. So we're well past the revolutions, and I don't think Dinah's here to look up for me. When is Napoleon taking power? Jojo. a few weeks ago with 1,000 Splendid Suns. Love from South Africa. An amazing country. I would love to get there someday. I wish I knew more about the history. I do have a book on my playlist called Cry the Beloved Country that's set in South Africa. So I don't know if you'll ever have to read that for school, but I'm ignorant about the history of South Africa, and I wish I knew more. So Jojo, thanks for letting me know. I really appreciate it, and good luck with your reading. Keep reading. Good job. On a night in mid-July, 1789, Mr. Lorry came in late from Tellson's and sat himself down by Lucy and her husband in the dark window. It was a hot, wild night, and they were all three reminded of the old Sunday night when he had looked at the lightning from the same place. I began to think, said Mr. Lorry, pushing his brown wig back, that I should have to pass the night at Tellson's. We've been so full of business all day that we've not known what to do first or which way to turn. There is such an uneasiness in Paris that we have actually a run of confidence upon us. Our customers over there seem not to be able to confide their property to us fast enough. There is positively a mania among some of them for sending to England. So I'm going to look at France, 1789, and just see what's going on there. France. Now, you know, the U.S. is very involved, but England and France are clashing. The French Revolution was a period of fundamental political and societal change in France. It began with the Estates General. This is the beginning of it, the French Revolution, 1789. Those are the three estates. Ends in 10 years later, November 1799. So you might want to make a note of that in your book if you're studying this for school. This is the beginning of the French Revolution, and that's going to become pivotal in this story itself. And me says, we had a school assignment, an individual oral. I live in the Netherlands. I taught students from the Netherlands, and I follow bilingual lessons. Wow. I love to hear about that. That is my big dream, to be able to be bilingual so that I could study in both English and another language. But is Dutch your second language? Do you also speak French? But yeah, I had just the cutest couple they were sisters that I taught. They had been educated in the Netherlands, but they were British by birth. Their mother was British, so they spoke English in the home. So they were completely fluent in English, but not literate academically. So they'd studied in the Netherlands, so all of their education was in Dutch, and their English you can be fluent in a language and not be able to read and write it. De la Mar, Spanish. See, that would be the obvious one with me living in Louisiana to learn Spanish, and Portuguese because my son lives in Brazil. But French was what I studied in high school, and that just seems to be what stayed with me the longest. When I lived in Sweden, I took Swedish classes, but jag knew. I've forgotten everything now. I just never got fluent in anything. I can understand some Arabic, some Farsi, some Portuguese, and the closest of any kind of fluency is French. So I keep thinking I'm going to get better at it. I would encourage you guys to keep improving. And Mies, that's amazing. I'm so impressed by that, your ability to do that, to study in both languages. All right, so we've got the beginning of the French Revolution. There is such an uneasiness in Paris that we've actually run a confidence upon us. Our customers over there seem not to be able to confide their property to us fast enough. There's positively a mania among some of them for sending it to England like their money. That has a bad look, said Darnay. A bad look, you say, my dear Darnay? Yes, but we don't know what reason there is in it. People are so unreasonable. Some of us at Tellson's are getting old, and we really can't be troubled out of the ordinary course without due occasion. Hey, Hazel. He learned Portuguese because he lives in Brazil, and he teaches English in Brazil. And just by living in the country, he had to learn Portuguese. He's been there, I guess, 11 years, maybe more than that now. Hazel, it's good to see you again. German and French. That's what I was thinking. So, do you watch a lot of American TV and movies, because that's how I hear a lot of teenage Europeans. That's how American teenagers get into K-pop. I mean, get into learning Korean because they like K-pop and Korean pop culture. So they start to learn Korean for that reason. So I'm wondering, Mies, if that's a big driver for you too. It'll be helpful to you to be so bilingual or trilingual, it sounds like. A bad look, you say, my dear Darnay? Yes, but we don't have what reason there is. People are so unreasonable. Some of us are, oh, I read that. Still, say Darnay, you know how gloomy and threatening the sky is. I know that to be sure, assented Mr. Lorry, trying to persuade himself that his sweet temper was soured, and that he grumbled, but am I determined to be peevish, like bothered, grumpy, after my long day's botheration? Botheration is not a word we use anymore. Oh, bother, Winnie the Pooh would say, but we just don't use this word. Maybe you guys could bring it back. Where is Manette? He is here, said the doctor, entering the dark room at a moment. I'm quite glad you're home, for these hurries and forebodings by which I am surrounded all day long have made me nervous without reason. You are not going out, I hope? No, I'm going to play backgammon with you if you like, said the doctor. I don't think I do like, if I may speak my mind. I'm not fit to be pitted against you tonight. Is the tea board still there, Lucy? I can't see. Of course, it's been kept here for you. Hashtag botheration. There you go. We can do that in Discord. Thank you, my dear. The precious child is safe in bed and sleeping soundly. That's right. All safe and well. I don't know why anything should be otherwise than safe and well here. I get looking ahead and then I lose my place. It's got a lot of reading. My throat's sore today. But I have been so put out all day, and I'm not as young as I was. My tea, my dear, thank you. Now come and take your place in the circle, and let us sit quiet and hear the echoes about which you've heard, which you have your theory. Not a theory; it was a fancy. A fancy, then, my wise pet, said Mr. Lorry, patting her hand. They are very numerous and very loud, though, are they not? Only hear them. Headlong, mad, and dangerous footsteps to force their way into anybody's life. Footsteps not easily made clean again if once stained red. The footsteps raging in Saint Antoine afar off as the little circle sat in the dark London window. Saint Antoine had been that morning a vast, dusky mass of scarecrows heaving to and fro with frequent gleams of light above the billowy heads where steel blades and bayonets shone in the sun. A tremendous roar arose from the throat of Saint Antoine, and a forest of naked arms struggled in the air like shriveled branches of trees in a winter wind, all the fingers convulsively clutching at every weapon or semblance of a weapon that was thrown up from the depths below, no matter how far off. Who gave them out? Whence they last came? Where they began? Through what agency they crookedly quivered and jerked, scores at a time, over the heads of the crowd? Like a kind of lightning, no eye in the throng could have told, but muskets, guns, were being distributed. So were cartridges, powder and ball, bars of iron and wood, knives, axes, pikes, every weapon that distracted ingenuity could discover or devise. People who could lay hold of nothing. Did you guys study the storming of the Bastille in school yet? Mies learned English at a very young age because we get very basic English classes. This is what I understand about Netherlands, which is in the Dell at 4 years old. YouTube and TV. That's D. Lamar, you hit 12.5. Oh, I know. I want to get, it's really slowed down though, D. Lamar. You're talking about subs. The summer, it always just drops off and I think that's it. I'm done. Nobody else wants to follow the channel. And then it's starting to pick back up again. So everybody took off their time, went on vacation, said, screw reading. I'm not going to do anything. And then they're like, oh, dang, summer reading. I better do something. Oh, Dinah, I'm on chapter 21, Echoing Footsteps. Do you have my version? If you do, it's 195. Tell me if you do, and I'll tell you exactly because it's got paragraph numbers down the side too. I'm in 21, Echoing Footsteps, and I'm about halfway through. I'm glad you're here. Oh, D. Lamar, that's so nice. Always be needed because there's always new waves of students. Yes, but will they be reading the classics or I'm hoping reading requirements will change somehow because I don't think I don't think it's the best way to build reading comprehension. I have really mixed feelings about that whole subject, which I'll have to do a Q&A on someday. My thoughts on how reading should be taught. So the paragraph, Dinah, as a whirlpool of boiling waters, it starts at a paragraph, has a center point. So all this raging circled around Defarge's wine shop. So we've jumped into France by way of narration, but not by, like, they're talking about what's going on over there. Defarge's wine shop, and every human drop in the cauldron had a tendency to be sucked towards the vortex where Defarge himself, already begrimed with gunpowder and sweat, issued orders, issued arms, thrust this man back, dragged this man forward, disarmed one to arm another, labored and strove in the thickest of the uproar. Keep near to me, Jacques III, said Defarge, and do you, Jacques I and II, separate and put yourselves at the head as many of these patriots as you can. Where is my wife? Hey, well, here you see me, said Madame, composed as ever, but not knitting today. Madame's resolute right hand was occupied with an axe in place of the usual softer implements, and in her girdle were a pistol and a cruel knife. All right, this is where I want to call. I'm going to see if I can Google search the fishmonger wives. Monger wives storm the Bastille. Let's see if I can find that. Man, it's so amazing what, yeah, this is the one I've seen. I don't know if you guys are going to be able to see it. They didn't have this when I was a kid. The internet is so amazing to me, but you guys can Google it if you can't see it. So there's the fishmonger wives, and they're just the very low class, the ones that have been starving, and they attack the Bastille, and they've just got every weapon in their hand. So these descriptions are making the assumption that we're all very familiar with the storming of the Bastille. Have you ever visited the Netherlands? I used to fly in and out of, I forget the name of the airport in Amsterdam, because I lived in Sweden for a while. And so that was the airport, but my daughter's been there, but I've never been as a tourist, just the airport write the name of the airport in Amsterdam. I should know it. I went through it so many times. Yes, Schiphol. The best airport I've flown to, and I've flown all over the world. Like, so clean. It even has a museum, an art gallery museum in it. It has amazing showers. If you've got a layover, you can reserve and take a shower in, clean. So nice. I love flying through Schiphol Airport. So thank you for reminding me. But that's the best I've done. And I keep wanting to come back to the Netherlands. Lately, I'm so grounded. I'm supposed to go to Brazil for my birthday in September, but I'm kind of scared to buy the ticket with all this stuff still creeping back up again. So he's worried about his wife. You shall see me at the head of the women by and by. She's determined, the wife. She's an interesting character. Come then, cried Defarge in a resounding voice. Patriots and friends, we are ready. The Bastille! So they're storming. With a roar that sounded as if all the breath in France had been shaped into the detested word, the living sea rose, wave on wave, depth on depth, and overflowed the city to that point. Alarm bells ringing, drums beating, the sea raging and thundering on its new beach, the attack began. I think it's an interesting plot development that we started in England, and they're talking about what's happening in France. And now we, as the reader, are brought in through the point of view of Defarge and Madame Defarge, but this is really not their chapter. I think that's an interesting technique. If you're doing any kind of AP work, you might want to focus on that point of view and that shift. It's interesting. Do you know the song called The Dutchman? Is that Dutchman's Bridgman's? How's that one go? Well, you can't sing it for me, Kelly. Maybe it's not, because it's not beautiful. The Dutchman. I'll have to look. Kelly, you know so much about music. I'll have to look that up when I get off. Or let's see if we can find it. The Dutchman lyrics. The Dutchman's, oh, that's great. I wonder if I can listen to it. Kelly, why do you know so much stuff? Celtic Thunder is the artist. And why am I so ignorant about it? Of course, we have to have a commercial because it's YouTube.
The Dutchman's not the kind of man to keep his thumb jammed in the dam that holds his dreams.
Here's a pause for a reference to the Dutchman. All right. I'll listen to that later now. Thanks for that, though, Kelly. No, it was Dinah who said, oh, it is Kelly. Yeah. You always know stuff about music. All right, so back to the storming of the Bastille. Deep ditches, double drawbridge, massive stone walls, 8 great towers, cannon, muskets, fire and smoke, through the fire and through the smoke, in the fire and in the smoke. For the sea cast him up upon a cannon, and on the instant he became a cannoneer. Defarge on the wine shop worked like a manful soldier 2 fierce hours. Deep ditch, single drawbridge, massive stone walls, 8 great towers, cannon, muskets, fire and smoke, 1 drawbridge down. Work, comrades, all work. Work, Jacques 1, Jacques 2, Jacques 1000, Jacques 2000, Jacques 5 and 20,000. In the name of all the angels or the devils, which you prefer, work. It's the storming of the Bastille. Thus Defarge of the wine shop, still at his gun, which had long grown hot. To me, women, cried Madame, his wife, what? We can kill as well as the men when their place is taken. And to her, with a shrill, thirsty cry, trooping women variously armed, but all armed alike in hunger and revenge, because their children have died, and they're angry. Cannon, muskets, fire and smoke, but still the deep ditch, the single drawbridge, the massive stone walls, and the 8 great towers, slight displacements of the raging sea made by the falling wound. Flashing weapons, blazing torches, smoking wagon loads of wet straw, hard work at neighboring barricades in all directions, shrieks, volleys, execrations, bravery without stint, boom, smash, and rattle, and the furious sounding of the living sea, but still the deep ditch, and the single drawbridge, and the massive stone walls, and the 8 great towers, and still Defarge of the wine shop at his gun, grown doubly hot by the service of 4 fierce hours. Really interesting way that he describes all this. A white flag from within the fortress and a parley, this dimly perceptible through the raging storm, nothing audible in it. Suddenly the sea rose immeasurably wider and higher and swept Defarge of the wine shop over the lower drawbridge, past massive stone outer walls, in among the 8 great towers surrendered. So resistless was the force of the ocean bearing him on, that even to draw his breath or turn his head was as impracticable as if he had been struggling in the surf at the South Sea, until he was landed in the outer courtyard of the Bastille. There, against an angle of the wall, he had made a straggle to look at him. Jacques 3 was nearly at his side. Madame Defarge, still heading some of her women, was visible in the inner distance, and her knife was in her hand. Everywhere was tumult, exultation, deafening and maniacal bewilderment, astonishing noise, yet furious dumb show. The prisoners, the records, the secret cells, the instruments of torture, the prisoners. Of all these cries and 10,000 incoherencies, the prisoners was the cry most taken up by the sea that rushed in, as if, now it's not the water sea, they are the sea of people. When the foremost billows rolled past, bearing the prison officers with them and threatening them all with instant death if any secret nook remained undisclosed, Defarge laid his strong hand on the breast of one of these men, a man with gray head, who had lighted a torch in his hand, separated him from the rest, and got him between himself and the wall. "Show me the North Tower," said Defarge. "Quick." "I will, faithfully," replied the man, "if you will come with me. But there is no one there." "What is the meaning of 105 North Tower?" asked Defarge. "Quick." "The meaning, monsieur? Does it mean a captive or a place of captivity? Or do you mean that I shall strike you dead?" "Kill him," croaked Jacques 3, who had come up close. "Monsieur, it's a cell." "Show it me." "Pass this way, then." Jacques 3, with his usual craving on him. Now, who was 105 North Tower? That's Dr. Manette, right? Have you ever had a stroopwafel? No, I did not have a stroopwafel. Now I have to go back. Is it tasty? I'm assuming it's food, not a drink. Oh, Madame Defarge with her sword. Yeah, the cover of your. It's a, I think, well-known painting. When I've gone too far. Women's March on Versailles, October 5th, 1789. Mob mentality. Kelly, we've talked about that in the Crucible, right? So we got to find 105 North Tower. What's the significance of that? That's where Dr. Manette was. Their three heads had been close together during this brief discourse, and it had been as much as they could do to hear one another. Even then, so tremendous was the noise of the living ocean. In its eruption into the fortress and its inundation of the courts and passages and staircases, all around outside too, it beat the walls with a deep, hoarse roar from which occasionally some partial shouts of tumult broke and leapt into the air like spray. Through gloomy vaults where the light of day had never shone, past hideous doors of dark dens and cages, down cavernous flights of steps, and again up steep, rugged ascents of stone and brick, more like dry waterfalls and staircases, Defarge, the turnkey, and Jacques III, linked hand and arm, went with all the speed they could make. Here and there, especially at first, the inundation started on them and swept by. But when they had done descending and were winding and climbing up a tower, they were alone. They're the only ones that are going to this particular North Tower. Hemmed in here by the massive thickness of walls and arches, the storm with the fortress and without was only audible to them in a dull, subdued way, as if the noise out of which they come had almost destroyed their sense of hearing. The turnkey stopped at a low door, put a key in a clashing lock, swung the door slowly open, and said, as they all bent their heads and passed in, 105 North Tower. There was a small, heavily grated, unglazed window high in the wall with a stone screen before it so that the sky could be only seen by a stooping glow and looking up. There was a small chimney, heavily barred across, a few feet within. There was a heap of old feathery wood ashes on the hearth. There was a stool and table and a straw bed. There were the 4 blackened walls and a rusted iron ring in one of them. Pass that torch slowly along these walls that I may see them, said Defarge to the turnkey. The man obeyed, and Defarge followed the light closely. So he's got a torch up against all the bricks of the cell, and he's looking brick by brick around the cell. And now we're going to read what a stroopwafel is. A cookie. Wavering. I've seen them. I have seen those. I just didn't eat one. Because, airport food's not always the best and always crazy expensive. I have to have a reason to go back to the Netherlands, to Schiphol, to Amsterdam. So he's got the torch. The man obeyed, and Defarge followed the light closely with his eyes. Stop. Look here, Jacques. A.M., croaked Jacques III as he read greedily. Alexandra Manette, said Defarge in his ear, following the letters with his swart forefinger, deeply ingrained with gunpowder. And here he wrote, a poor physician. And it was he, without a doubt, who scratched a calendar on this stone. What is it? What is that in your hand? A crowbar? Give it me. He had still the linstock of his gun in his own hand. He made a sudden exchange of the 2 instruments and, turning on the worm-eaten stool and table, beat them to pieces in a few blows. Hold the light higher, he said wrathfully to the turnkey. Look among these fragments with care, Jacques, and see. Here is my knife, throwing it to him. Rip open that bed and search the straw. Hold the light higher, you. With a menacing look at the turnkey, he crawled upon the hearth and, peering up the chimney, struck and prized at its side with the crowbar and worked at the iron grating across it. In a few minutes, some mortar and dust came dropping down, which he averted his face to avoid, and in it, and in the old wood ashes, and in a crevice in the chimney into which his weapon had slipped or wrought itself, he groped with a cautious touch. Nothing in the wood, and nothing in the straw, Jacques? Nothing. Let us collect them together in the middle of the cell. So, light them, you. Oh, Mies, get back to work. It was nice to chat with you. So light them, like put them on fire. The turnkey fired the little pile, which blazed high and hot. Stooping again to come out at the low arched door, they left it burning and retraced their way to the courtyard, seeming to recover their sense of hearing as they came down until they were in the raging flood once more. They found it surging and tossing in quest of Defarge himself. Saint Antoine was clamorous to have its wine shop keeper foremost in the guard upon the governor who had defended the Bastille and shot the people. Otherwise, the governor would be marched to the Hôtel de Ville for judgment. Otherwise, the governor would escape, and the people's blood, suddenly of some value after many years of worthlessness, be unavenged. In the howling universe of passion and contention, that seemed to encompass this grim old officer, conspicuous in his gray coat and red decoration. There was but one quite steady figure, and that was a woman. "See, there is my husband," she cried, pointing him out. "See, Defarge." She stood immovable, close to the grim old officer, and remained immovable close to him, through the streets, as Defarge and the rest bore him along, remained immovable close to him when he got near his destination and began to be struck at from behind, remained immovable close to him when the long gathering rain of stabs and blows fell heavy. This characterization of remaining immovable, she stood immovable, she remains immovable. This really goes to the character of her, and we'll discover later how important it is that she is just determined to be unmoved. And that repetition is important too. To him, when the long gathering rain of stabs and blows fell heavy, was so close to him when he dropped dead under it that suddenly animated, she put her foot upon his neck and with her cruel knife, long ready, hewed off his head. This is Madame Defarge. The hour was come when Saint Antoine was to execute his horrible idea of hoisting up men for lamps to show what he could be and do. Saint Antoine's blood was up, and the blood of tyranny and domination by the iron hand was down on the steps of the Hôtel de Ville, where the governor's body lay, down on the sole of the shoe of Madame Defarge, where she had trodden on the body to steady it for mutilation. "Lower the lamp yonder," cried Saint Antoine, after glaring round for a new means of death. Here is one of the soldiers to be left on guard. The swinging sentinel was posted, and the sea rushed on. The sea of black and threatening waters and of destructive upheaving of wave after wave, whose depths were yet unfathomed and whose forces were yet unknown. The remorseless sea of turbulently swaying shapes, voices of vengeance, and faces hardened in the furnaces of suffering until the touch of pity could make no mark on them. But in the ocean of faces, where every fierce and furious expression was in vivid life, there were two groups of faces, each 7 in number, so fixedly contrasting with the rest, that never did sea roll which bore more memorable wrecks with it. 7 faces of prisoners, suddenly released by the storm that had burst their tomb, were carried high overhead, all scared, all lost, all wondering and amazed, as if the last day were come, and those who rejoiced among them were lost spirits. Other 7 faces there were, carried higher, 7 dead faces, whose drooping eyelids and half-seen eyes awaited the last day. Impassive faces, yet with a suspended, not an abolished expression on them, faces, rather in fearful pause of having yet to raise their drooped lids of the eyes and bear witness with the bloodless lips. Thou didst it. 7 prisoners released, 7 gory heads on pikes, the keys of the accursed fortress of the 8 strong towers, some discovered letters and other memorials of prisoners of old time, long dead, of broken hearts, such and such like, the loudly echoing steps of Saint Antoine escort through the Paris streets in mid-July, 1789. Now heaven defeat the fancy of Lucie Darnay, and keep these feet far out of her life, for they are headlong, mad, and dangerous. And in the years so long after the breaking of the cask at Defarge's wine shop door, they are not easily purified when once stained red. And that is the storming of the Bastille, really dramatically done. Such a great passage. And this is not going to be the focus of the story, but you have to understand the context of the rage and the anger and the cruelty that's been done to these people. What were they looking for in the tower? They're looking for something of Dr. Manette. And we'll learn later. I mean, it will become important later, Dinah. But the tower that I can't think, the cell that they went to was what housed Dr. Manette. And this is all going to connect in a little bit. It is going to be something specific, but I don't want to give anything away. It's going to be, we'll come into it later. So remember that they were looking for this. I don't have time, because this is 45 minutes. I don't have time to read any more vocabulary. I think there were only a few from last time anyway. Unit after trial. Let's see. There were only a few. Page, incessantly laudable. Now keep going. Book 2. We did that one. The end of the book, Oblivion, pensive. We taught, yeah, that word was in there. Detested. Those are pretty simple words, right? Oblivion. Many books written. I did that one last time. So they were forgotten. To be in the oblivion is to be, if you're oblivious, you're clueless. You don't have any idea. You've forgotten everything. The next was pensive. When you are in a pensive mood, you want to be alone with your thoughts. So sadly thoughtful, kind of broody, kind of moody. Detested is severe hatred. To the participants of the Boston Tea Party, the tea was detested symbol of the British power to levy taxes arbitrarily. So much hated, detested. So not a lot of vocabulary this time. We're moving into Unit 10. It's about the revolution. So there would be questions we could talk about. This goes to your question, Dinah. What might be the purpose of mentioning some discovered letters and other memorials of prisoners of old time on page 200, lines 23 through 24? We're reminded that Defarge is looking for something in Dr. Manette's old cell. We still don't know at that point. These footsteps, these echoes, this is really an interesting technique of Dickens, that she's having the echoes in her mind, because she wasn't actually there, Lucy, I mean, about this Bastille, the storming of the Bastille. A great storm. They call it the storming of the Bastille. Interesting. They compare it to the waves of oceans, and it was an unrealistic uprising. Something, I mean, they murdered people just ruthlessly. These fishmonger wives were furious. Their children had died for no reason. So glad to have you guys here. I'm going to keep reading. That's chapter 22. And how many more do we have? It's 22. Book 3 is coming up. So 22 and 20 through 24 is all we have left in book 2. And then we have The Track of a Storm, the last of it. And I promise you, I will not get through this story without crying. It's just not possible for me. I know the story and it still makes me cry. All right. I really appreciate you guys all so much. It's Sunday. Tomorrow I go back to work. So God knows when I'm going to get back on here to read again. I hope you have a good Monday. I hope you, those of you that are not working and not in school, are enjoying your summer. I miss those days. Elizabeth, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Raji. How is your reading coming? So go ahead and subscribe if you haven't, because as Dee Lamar said, we're at 12,500. Let's get to 13,000, but then that's unlucky. So let's get to 14,000. But it goes really slowly in the summer, so I'll just be patient. You guys keep reading. Subscribe if you haven't. Ring the bell if you haven't. Do something fun tonight. If you haven't done something fun today, move. Kelly, I hope you're feeling well. Dinah, you're reading like crazy. Dee Lamar, always good to hear from you. Hazel, thank you. And you have a good evening too. And I'll talk to you guys on Discord. So I will read to you next time. See ya.